Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Crack in the Bat, brought to you by the Irish American Baseball Society. The Irish American Baseball Society is a society for Irish people who love baseball and baseball people who love Ireland. I'm Shaun Clancy. I'm also president of the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame, and I'm delighted to be talking to my guest today, which is Danny Boy O'Connor. People will may not recognize the name, but you definitely remember House of Pain. Danny, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us here today, and thank you for taking time to spend and talk about baseball, talk about Ireland, and a lot of other stuff. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to be here. I follow you guys on Twitter, and I definitely am Irish, and I definitely love baseball, so I feel right at home.
So let's talk about that for a second. So, born in Brooklyn.
Yeah, born in Brooklyn in the '60s. Moved immediately to Staten Island with my grandparents because my father went to prison when I was 2 months old, and my mother was a single parent. I moved to California when I was about 6 years old, and then my mother exported me back to New York and New Jersey area until I was about 16. Oh, look at that dog. There you go.
It's Foley. Hello, Foley. Yes, Foley is the co-host. She doesn't say very much, but she does like to be a part of the process.
She's a beaut.
So,
yeah, so I've had a very unique upbringing. Looking back, I couldn't have planned it any better. Growing up on both coasts in the '70s and '80s was fantastic. I have a master's degree in pop culture and a little bit of both coasts, or a lot of bit of both coasts, and I like to call it the poor man's Glenn E. Friedman experience. And if you don't know who that is, Google that. It's a prolific photographer who literally captured the Dogtown early skateboard era in the '70s in Santa Monica and Venice and West Los Angeles. Then he goes to parlays that into the punk rock stuff. So he's done like the Minor Threat album cover and a million other album covers that you love. And then he ends up at Def Jam and doing all the hip hop stuff from the Beasties to Public Enemy. So if you Google Glenn E. Friedman, and he also, which is one of the greatest things ever, he lent Suicidal Tendencies 20 grand to get their first album to go. So he's executive producer and the photographer on the first Suicidal Tendencies record, which I'm not going to lie was the first punk record that I ever bought. Originally, I was a little too young for the first wave of punk by a couple years. So, I was more of a hip hop dude at its inception than I was punk, and then later, filled in the gaps. But yeah. What a way to grow up. I don't regret a moment of going back and forth. And nowadays, everybody can do that via the internet. We're all kind of on the same page. But
right.
Back then, it was like having wizard skills when it comes to music and culture.
So you're a little bit like the Irish Fresh Prince.
Okay, I'll take it. I'll take what I can get and love it. And I will say this as it pertains to baseball. I used to, in the early '80s, especially in California, but pretty much all over America, baseball card collecting became a real thing, kind of like non-fungible tokens today in today's world, or cryptocurrency.
Right.
And the cards demanded a bigger price tag here in Los Angeles, or there in Los Angeles. I now live in Tulsa, but I would go back every summer and get a bunch of stuff on the cheap, because what was popular in LA might not be as popular in New York, and vice versa.
Right.
So you could do all right collecting baseball cards this way in the '80s. So yeah.
Now I'm looking at the hat. So I saw the hat, and I wasn't sure if it was a fashion symbol or. So you are a fan of the Yankees?
Yeah, the most diehard fan that you may have ever met. And the funny thing about it is, growing up in Los Angeles, I was a Pete Rose fan. So wherever Pete Rose went, there went my loyalty. And even though I was a diehard Yankees fan, I was a bigger fan of baseball and the biggest fan of Pete Rose himself, even though he was a Cincinnati Red, then a Phillies, world champion,
right.
And then where did he go? The Expos, and then I don't even know where he ended up in the end. But yeah. So, but Yankees are my team, man. The legacy, the history. I'm actually, like I said, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but Oklahoma's known. It's Mickey Mantle's birthplace. I'm about an hour away from it. I've been many times, taken many people to it. So Bobby Mercer, of course, is an Oklahoma City guy. Johnny Bench is also an Okie. There's a lot of Okie baseball players, which the history is rich here. And yeah,
Actually, another one
Definitely.
that is, well, not a Yankee, but Jeremy Hefner, who's now the pitching coach for the Mets.
Nice.
Um,
There you
so
go.
who's your before we move on? So all time favorite Yankee?
All-time favorite Yankee that I never seen would have been Mickey Mantle. All-time favorite Yankee that I had the pleasure to meet and watch would be Mariano Rivera, and
Yeah.
close second by Reggie Jackson, who I had the displeasure to meet, and definitely loved watching him hit 3
That
home
makes
runs
two
when I
of
was a
us.
kid. Depending on how you meet Pete Rose, too, that could go
Yeah,
sideways as well.
I'll be honest with you. When I had Foley's, I had a couple of opportunities where people said, you should do something with Pete. In fact, Pete has some Irish in him too, and they're like, actually, it's a California guy, Steve Garvey, for years has been like, hey, we got to get Pete Rose in the Irish Hall of Fame, And I had I had an opportunity to do a couple of different things with him, but never showed up.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
crazy. I mean, listen, again, I've heard nothing but personal. I have a personal. I can't tell it, but I can tell you when we talk off camera. But Mickey Mantle was definitely no joy to be around, and I've heard a few terrible stories. I had a documentary basically with people just going on and on about how disappointing he was to meet, because he was an alcoholic and he didn't have a filter, and very angry for a long time. And that
Danny,
being said, you know what they say about meeting your heroes or your idols,
yeah.
man. I mean,
But actually, the funny thing, Danny, to bring it to a different level is so my father worked in a very famous restaurant in New York in the 60s, and
okay.
called Touch Shores, and that's where they all
Oh,
went.
come on. Of course. Everybody knows that restaurant. I
But
mean,
my father, before I tell you, Mickey Mantle couldn't drink. He has his reputation being a big drinker. He just wasn't. He couldn't handle alcohol.
yeah,
The guys who could drink
that
were Billy Martin and Whitey Ford, but
right.
listen, you're
And
right.
Billy Martin got in trouble for it all anyway. They blamed everything when those fights
Billy
broke
was
out.
just
That's
one
why
of those
Billy got
guys
kicked
that
off.
he had the reputation of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's
Yeah.
so
And
so
that reminds me, before you go further, I have to say it that Thurman Munson, also as a kid, I remember watching him. And then after knowing what I know about him, I would have loved to not only meet him, but I definitely have a Thurman Munson jersey that I wear to most games if I go to games, and most proud of that guy. He just seems like a meat and potatoes.
yeah.
What you see is what you get. No bullshit kind of player. So
But he
kind of love
exactly.
that guy.
I don't know how some of those players would have been able to survive today with social media and stuff like that, because Munson
Yeah.
just wanted to play baseball. He didn't care for any of the other stuff that came with the game.
Yeah. God
But
rest
let's
his
get back
soul,
to
man.
Danny Boy for a second. So
Huh.
you're at William Howard Taft High School,
Mm-hmm.
California. You meet the
Yep.
guys, and basically, kind of along the same lines as you two, House of Pain comes about.
Right.
Um,
So just to back that up a little, so I went to Taft High School, which was this very upper crust public school. It sits right below Ventura Boulevard. Anything south of Ventura is like big money. If you make big money in Hollywood, the dream is, or the deal is, you end up going to the San Fernando Valley, get a 4 or 5 bedroom house, a pool, everything that suburban life could offer you back then in particular. So Taft High School was a beautiful high school. And we had a lot of people that were transplants and from all over the world that would send their kids there. So Ice Cube got bussed into that school. There was another dude named D-Rock D, who had a single out, or a couple singles out in hip hop. Some of the New Edition guys' cousins went there. Stevie Wonder's cousins went there. They were called the Throwdown Twins. They had a group. Brett Mazer, another guy, DJ Epic from Crazy Town, but he was also a producer, produced Belle Biv DeVoe albums and stuff like that. So we had Divine Styler with summer school there. So it was a melting pot of all kinds of people coming from all over. And if you came to LA, you would end up in the San Fernando Valley. So that school early on had just this weird hip hop vibe to it, in the most Jeff Spicoli, Fast Times at Ridgemont High type of high school you could imagine. So I don't know how that happened. It's definitely a phenomenon at that time. It's not there anymore like that. But so it was very, we doing hip hop back in the day as white kids, there was a handful of us, but we all kind of were in that same area, if that makes sense. So
right.
lucky to be in that era, and we definitely parlayed it into a career.
So I mean, obviously, House of Pain. You're. Here's a question. You're synonymous, obviously, for Jumper Out. I mean,
Okay.
do
I've heard that.
do you cringe? Do you? I
I,
mean,
No, it is. At times, perhaps the cringe comes from when you're at an event and you're not trying to. You're trying to just be involved in the event, or you're. You know, it's. I like escapism too. This is what sports provides. It's like a couple hours of like turning off the outside world and focusing on something that'll just take your mind away. And then the song comes on, and depending on mood or whatever, it brings me back to old resentments or the glory days or whatever. So it kind of snaps you back to reality. So depending on where I'm at mentally when it comes on, depends on where I go with it. But I don't want anybody to ever think that being part of that song and being synonymous with it, even though I didn't write that song, Everlast gets all the credit for that, and Muggs for the production. It's a blessing, man. And I never want anybody to think that I'm ungrateful for that, because it definitely is. It's the thing that it's just, yeah, they think of that when they think of us. And so
I mean, it
no
took you around the
complaints.
world.
Huh?
It took you around. I mean, it took you around the world.
Oh, it changed my life. It changed all of our lives. And I mean, and a big part of that too is, Everlast was signed to Ice-T, and he made a great record. And I was probably the first fan of that record. But I saw a lot of holes in that the game plan, because I didn't understand who that record was pitched at. Because definitely as a white boy, it wasn't really, I didn't feel like he was speaking for me. And so when that deal fell apart for him, and then me and him reconnected, and we started going back and forth, I started to think like, look, on the landscape, I don't see us. I see the Beastie Boys. I see third base. At the time, they were apples to oranges to us, and I was like, we're Irish. We're that punch you in your face type of dudes. We brought a different aggression to hip hop. And I said earlier that I was a fan of Suicidal Tendencies, and in more ways than one. But Suicidal Tendencies, when they played, they had a gang that followed them, and that gang was Suicidals. And we had a gang before we had a band, if that makes sense. And we were
Right.
a two-tone bunch of misfits, mostly Irish, but a few black dudes, a few Mexican dudes, we were at all the spots. And believe me when I tell you, we were known before we were known for making records. We were known for getting in a lot of trouble that way. And so we just did it the opposite of Suicidal Tendencies. They had a band, and then the band had a gang following of friends. We had a gang, and we turned it into a group and went that route. So different
So,
than
yeah,
what
no,
was out there at the time.
that makes perfect sense. But so, if I could say to you, is if there one thing or one person that you got to meet because of House of Pain? Is there one experience where you can say,
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe the first couple of months, maybe the first month that the record was out, I got a fax, and my manager got a fax, and they called me. It said, Mickey Rourke just faxed you. I was like, why? Who? What? Huh? Mickey Rourke, the actor? They're like, yeah. And he faxed something like, congratulations on your success. Keep kicking ass. Love and respect, Mickey. So I went down and seen him at the boxing gym. He had Outlaw Boxing at the time. And I walked in. I met Freddie Roach, another fantastic Irish boxing
colorful
legend.
character?
Yeah. And Freddie was living at the gym basically at the time, and I met Mickey, and I think the first thing he wanted to do was spar with me. And I'm nice with my hands, I get down for mine, but he was a better boxer for sure. There's a big difference for those who don't know. I'm sure a lot of people do know. Fighting and boxing, completely two different things. And I don't want to say he boxed my ears off, but he cracked me a few good ones, and I knew it was real. We went 3 rounds, and we became fast friends, and that's definitely the first major. Is a star. It's not even a celebrity. Mickey was on a whole other level, even in the early '90s, as he was like, he was coming back down to earth. Definitely a life-changing experience for me, and definitely another one of those dudes that qualifies in the Mickey Mantle thing. Long term, there's part of me that wishes I never met him, but I would never change a thing in my life. He didn't do anything wrong, but it was just when those kind of dudes come into your life, it's so impactful. So when they walk out of your life as a friend, you kind of, there's a gap that never gets filled, and so yeah. But definitely Mickey Rourke would be the first one that comes to mind. And I love it. I got nothing but love and respect for Mickey, man. And whether he knows it or not, I'm always out here rooting for his success, his happiness, and any other thing. It fell apart after about 4 years of friendship, and when I see him, it's like seeing a stranger. I've ran into him a few different times as of late, maybe a couple years ago, and we're just, hey Mick, how you doing? Okay, cool, see you later. And it's just so weird because we were so tight for so
Right.
long. But yeah,
So I have to tell you my House of Pain story. Obviously, I'm kind of more of a country guy, but I was a bartender in New York
an
during
Irish
that
country
time.
guy, huh?
Oh yeah. Well, hey, you got to understand the Irish invented country music. You go back far enough, the fiddle and the banjo and all that stuff that came from Ireland.
You're right.
But so I was a bartender in the bar, busy bar in Manhattan. And when we closed the doors, we wouldn't go to 4, we went to 2. So when we closed the doors on a busy night, as we're cleaning up and counting the cash and counting the tips, the jukebox would just keep going and going and going because people have been putting money in it all night. And we used to
Right.
play jukebox bingo. And basically, I mean, we were making crazy money, so we might put $50 or $100 each into the kitty, and everyone got to pick 3 songs. And once your 3 songs had played, you won. My first go-to every time was Jump Around because it and Losing My Religion were ones that you could count on. You have no idea how many times a night I heard that song.
There you go.
So I was making money. I was making money off. And then I felt
See,
guilty.
everybody got paid off a jump around. How can
Well,
you not love it? I mean,
well,
listen.
I felt guilty then. I said, you know what? I said I've made a lot of money off these House of Pain boys, and they are Irish. So I did go out and somewhere I have the CD. I think the
There
only
you go.
track I may have listened to was Jump Around, but I listened to
That's
it
all you
over and over
need.
and over again. So,
Nice.
you know, but so,
Listen. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
so I have to ask you, so growing up, what Irish music did you listen to?
Very little. I didn't know anything about being Irish except for that my father was Irish. My mother is half Irish. My father is right off the boat. He was born in New York, but his parents were right off the boat. They're from the Rebel County, and they had a dog, an Irish setter named Kerry. So they're from Kerry and Cork. I think my father's parents lasted around 20 something years in New York, and then they went back to Ireland. But my father was very Irish and very proud of that fact. I really didn't get to meet my father too many times because of his being a drunk and going back and forth to prison. And I really didn't get into discovering my heritage until hip hop kind of in a way turned on me, and I'll explain. So being early into hip hop, you had to take a lot of flack, and it's not like today's world where I see kids in the mall with faux hawks and Ramon shirts at the age of 3, or Wu-Tang shirts on 5-year-olds. It just was like, if you were a white kid and you were in suburbia and you were listening to hip hop, you can understand that's going to come with some kind of connotation problem. Even parents didn't want me around their kids because they thought I was no good, just based on how I dressed, talked, and the music I listened to. And so to come, a good 5 years or more into, from the early days of hip hop into like the mid to late 80s, and all of a sudden, a lot of the groups are starting to talk about the stuff that Farrakhan's talking about, basically calling white people the devil, and this 5%er religion starts to creep in, and all of my favorite MCs, Big Daddy Kane and Public Enemy and a handful of others are adopting that or pitching that. I'm starting to feel like, wow, where do I fit in? What did I do? And I felt like I had a target on my back all of a sudden just by being white and in hip hop. And so when I went home to ask my mother about our family history, she's like, dummy, your grandparents came here 50 years ago. We never had we had nothing to do with slavery, or we're not racist, or we're not, that's not us. So I was like, good, because I didn't know who cared when I'm a kid. I didn't care about any of that kind of stuff. I wasn't a racist, so I didn't see life through a racist lens. So I didn't think any of those things applied to me. And I thought anybody that I'd come into contact would clearly understand that I'm not that. But when I started to hear Farrakhan speak, and knowing that I was being looked at as the devil, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. So I started to get into my heritage as like a kind of thing to tell people, look, bro, this is who we are. You know what I mean? We left Ireland because of oppression, because of the Catholic thing, and because of, the situations, the troubles in Ireland in the 70s. And so that became my new like thing. And when I met Everlast, he realized that he had some Irish, family members, and he identified with that. And so that was kind of the thing we did to separate ourselves from like the Beastie Boys or Third Base, saying, look, we're not apologetic about being white. And
Right.
we're definitely celebrating our Irish heritage, which is have a drink, punch you in your face, and with all the other stereotypical shit. Irish people are the only people who embrace that kind of thing. There's no cancel culture for the Fighting Irish, mascot or Irish Spring soap or any of the other, plastic patty shit that they put on
Yeah.
products. We don't get offended by it. I celebrate it because I can laugh at myself. And I think the beauty of being Irish is that we have the ability to make fun of ourselves and not take ourselves that seriously. And that's the part as I get older that I love, because it for me, I love being Irish for that and that alone, is that, you know what, I'm jovial. I got to tell you, I love that dog, man. I feel like from now on, I'm doing all my shows. I got to get me a dog. But I feel like the
A
Irish thing,
co-host.
it's manyfold for me. But there's nothing I don't like. I love Irish poets. I love Irish literature, history, even the struggle and the way that we process things are different in my eyes than other people do. And so I'll always be proud to be Irish. It's a part of my father's family that I never really knew, but a connection to that. And yeah, I just, it's, I'm listen, in House of Pain, and I don't think I've ever said this before, I'm the Irish guy in House of Pain. Our DJ was Latvian, a Jewish Latvian dude with a heart of gold. Everlast has whatever percentage of Irish in him, but he's not. I'm the Irish guy in House of Pain, and it was my design. It was my logo. It's my band name. It's my imagery. I'm the brand guy, and so for me, celebrating who I was rather than hiding it was a definitely necessary thing to do at that time in hip hop. And it, you know what? It brought millions of kids out of the fucking closet, if you will, that were hiding behind it because they didn't feel accepted if they were all into hip hop because
Right.
of the problems it might cause you in the community at the time. And all of a sudden, now you've got a few bands to look up to. But in particular, you got one that's repping, and going hard around, in an alpha male sport. So us and Cypress Hill kind of had that 90s thing on lock early on. You got an Irish group and a Cuban Latino group going full force, with that. And it disrupted hip hop in the best possible ways. And it opened a lot of doors for a lot of other people it was an invitation in to what seemed like a very closed, culture, if you will,
Gotcha,
if
right.
that makes
So
sense.
you
Yeah.
said, so have you ever read or seen any of Brendan Behan's stuff?
Of course.
Because
Of
I mean,
course. Of course.
you could identify a lot. The obviously he was known for his drinking. There's
Yeah.
another Irish
Some of the
poet.
best photos I've ever seen are him, half in the bag.
Well,
And then again, you got, go ahead.
there's another. Well, I'm just going to tell you a funny story. So there's a very famous Irish poet, another Irish poet called Patrick Kavanagh, and what made Kavanagh unique was Kavanagh. Um, he wrote in the vernacular, in the language of the people. So you didn't have to read into what he was saying. He was a farmer, but again fond of the drink. And there was a story where Behan met Kavanagh at 9 o'clock one morning in O'Connell Street in Dublin, and they said, "Come on, let's go and have a pint." And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they had to give up because they couldn't find a single bar in Dublin that would serve the two of them. Or either one or both of them were barred out of both of the bars. Now, bringing that back, because I read somewhere, so you have played in Ireland.
I have what?
You have performed in Ireland.
Yeah, we have performed in Ireland. The first time I went there, I got alcohol poisoning, so I definitely tell you it runs in the family. I missed the first show. We've definitely been back, but unfortunately, they were few and far between. We did a few shows early on, I guess in '92 when we just had a single out or the album had just dropped. We went back, I think, in '93 or '94 for a full tour, which was cool, but it was a blur because I definitely was definitely deep in the Guinness. And then when we went back years later, it was for festivals. So we would fly in, get in a car, get to the festival, do our show, get back in the car, go to a hotel, and be 6 in the morning at the airport to get out of there. And the last time we went was actually Snoop Dogg brought us out there. I'm gonna guess in like 2009 2008 or 7. He had a show. Him and Puffy had a tour in Europe, and they got kicked out of. They wouldn't let him in London because of his marijuana criminality that was going on. So he said, "Fuck them," and they moved the show to Dublin, and then he called Everlast and said, "Get your passports ready. I'm flying you out first class just to do jump around at the end of our show. Are you in?" And we were both in New York, and we said, "Absolutely, we were in." And we found ourselves in Dublin a week later doing jump around, and it was even more of a blur. And I was sober because by the time we flew in, got to the venue, did the show, got back to the hotel, and had to be back on a flight. It was literally a 24-hour
You really did
turnaround.
jump around.
Yeah, we come out.
Literally.
So Snoop closes Jump Around, I think is his closing song to all of his concerts. I don't know if he's changed the set list, but for years he's been doing Jump Around as a closer, which is go figure, one of the biggest rap stars on the planet, if not the biggest, does a House of Pain song at the end of each set. That doesn't even make sense to me, but I'm so glad that he does it. He's actually playing here with Ice Cube in a month or so. So we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll get up and kick a few for my new Tulsa friends, but obviously that to be determined.
So last thing on the trip to Ireland, I read somewhere. So you ended up in the back of a police van.
We did. So you're talking the first trip. So when I first got to Ireland, some guys were waiting in the lobby for me, and they basically told me that they were waiting for me and that they wanted to take me to Parnell Square and bring me to the Sinn Féin bookstore to meet a few people. And so I was all in. Everlast opted out, maybe smarter than us. And I roped old DJ Lethal along because he just wanted to sit at the hotel. So we went to the Sinn Féin bookstore. They gave us a bunch of literature. I bought some of those handkerchiefs that came from Long Cash that people used to, put IRA imagery on. And I bought a bunch of buttons and badges, and I was like a kid in the candy store. This was something that was important to me, that Ireland become a free state, and that the Brits get out. And so I left there with a big old bag and a big old smile, and then we got back in our van, and maybe a mile out of there, our van literally gets cut off the road and pulled to the side by 2 cars. Now the guys that met us in the lobby, their faces completely changed. So I knew we were some deep shit, because they went from rah-rah, like tough guys, to like, oh no. The door comes flying open, and all I hear was surnames. And I was like, huh? He goes, surnames, lad. I didn't even know what that means. In the US, we call it your last name, not your surname. And they were screaming their names out. It was SAS. They pulled us out of the van, put us on the curb, got everybody. They told me, they said, dude, you don't think we were waiting for you? We knew you were coming. We knew how you felt, and we knew you would be there. And they took all of my stuff from me. They wouldn't let me keep any of the stuff that I bought at the bookstore, any stuff that I'd been given at the bookstore, and warned me to stay away from there and have a good show. House of Pain is what he said last. He put us in the van. Those 2 guys that brought us, their faces, and the van driver, they were mortified. They dropped us at the hotel. I got drunk, and I went back to the bookstore. I bought more shit than I bought the first time, told them what had happened, and then walked home to the hotel, and nothing happened. We did our show, had a good time, and in the airport, right as I was getting ready to get on our flight, I was pulled aside by 2 guys who said, ha, you thought you were going to go somewhere with that shit, huh? They took my bag again and told me have a nice flight. And so they got me twice, those fuckers. And I think the second time we went back, we did a festival, and we did the Fela Fest, and they brought us on the BBC to talk about our experience. And I started to go on about Jerry Adams inviting us to do some kind of thing, and they literally pulled the plug and kicked us off the air. And I ended up almost beating up the broadcaster, the DJ. It was crazy back then. And I remember, even prior to that, if you see anything on the news, they would even use voiceovers for any Irish-speaking person that was
Jerry
speaking
Adams,
English, because they wouldn't even let them.
Any member as a kid growing up, they couldn't, we didn't know what. Truthfully, I think I was 20 before I knew what Jerry Adams sounded like, because we'd see him speak, but it would be dubbed. So I want to segue to the next chapter of your life. But before I go, I do have a question. Did you watch the halftime of the Super Bowl? And how did it
No,
make you feel if you did?
I did. So no is the answer. I don't. How do I say this? My love affair with hip hop is like it remains in the 80s and 90s, and I don't recognize. I don't say don't recognize. It just doesn't. If you found my iPod, you wouldn't know who to return it to because there's very little hip hop on it. And it's not to say that I don't love hip hop, but it like jump around hearing it at sporting events cuts both ways, and it's just
Right.
something that I just don't feel a part of anymore. Um, Not to say that the love isn't there, but I listen to other stuff. So the last thing I care about is seeing, a Super Bowl, especially in knowing that it's like no, so I did not watch it, and that it's not me speaking ill of hip hop. I'm always going to be a b-boy, and that's what I consider myself. You know, and but my love affair starts with Rapper's Delight, and it ends somewhere in the mid '90s, maybe with Mobb Deep and Wu Tang. And there's a late run of like Def Jam stuff in the '90s with Jay Z and all of those associated acts. But for real, like that era was such a golden era for me, and it's so like sacred that the stuff that came after. Listen, I listen to some new stuff, Conway and West Side Gun, and some of the tougher stuff like that. But I don't feel like I'm part of that scene anymore. And I find myself listening to more Cocktail Twins and Susie and the Banshees than I do listening to current hip hop. So
What about the
for what it's
Pogues?
worth, I love the Pogues. We did a show actually once. We were on a festival show with the Pogues, and then which we really didn't get to see that show because of timing. But yeah, I love anything. Of course, I love the Pogues. I wish I had the $1,000 book that he just made, or maybe it's a $10,000 book. I just seen Johnny Depp holding a book, hanging out with some like real comprehensive Pogues book that they did. So, but
McGowan's
again,
quite a
all of
character.
what happened.
Shane McGowan is quite a character.
Oh, I bet. We met. We barely got to say hello to him in the airport as we were leaving this festival. He was again. He lived up to the hype. I mean, he just had handlers and just was on a whole other planet. But just to see him and be next to him was cool. But this is the kind of stuff I discovered later. As a kid, I didn't know who the Pogues were. I didn't know who all of this stuff was. I figured out that this was going to be something that was important to me after once I said like I realized that like this is who I am and this is what I'm going to embrace. And then I went back and got interested in all that. Same with Stiff Little Fingers. Like I didn't know that in the 70s or 80s. That wasn't on my radar. The punk I listened to was like skate punk. It was Agent Orange and Suicidal Tendencies and Ill Repute, Stalag 13, mostly West Coast skate punk bands because skateboarding and punk rock and gangbanging at that time looking like cholos as white boys was like what we did. And so I didn't learn about like even the Sex Pistols, man. It's like, I want to say I'm good friends with Steve Jones. I mean, and I love that what they did for the world as far as music's concerned. But it took the documentary, The Filth and the Fury, the Julian Temple thing, for me to understand in context how important that Never Mind the Bollocks was, and how a disruptive force it was, and changed everything for me to appreciate it in the way I do now. Because just listening to the record in the 80s, I was like, all right, it's cool, but so what? Like, why do they jock this band so much? Now I
Right.
understand why, between Vivian Westwood's connection and Malcolm's connection and the Pistols, what they did. And it's fascinating. And that's the kind of stuff I love. But this comes way later than than in their heyday and stuff. And this is why we
Yeah.
still celebrate, and those
I mean, I
albums
was
never stop selling.
you and I mean, you're just a couple of years older than me, and I growing up, I was a huge fan of music, and I couldn't understand it either. And same thing when when you're suddenly in your 20s and they're explaining the culture and what they went through and the connections they had, then I'm like, that makes
Yeah.
sense. But listen,
And
we have to
let me
talk.
tell you this. I want to tell you that this is why the Beastie Boys were so great, because they knew how to take. When I look at the Beastie Boys now, especially the early stuff, just License to Ill and Paul's Boutique, they you see the Clash in there, you see the Sex Pistols in there, you see the Pogues in there, I see all of because they came out of that punk scene and they knew how to put that in their secret sauce, and that energy and that like being half Johnny Lydon with the snarky shit, and then the comedy, and they had such a perfect blend early on of all of that, and that's what makes them so superior to just straight hip hop acts who just had one look and one level and one linear mood or mode. The Beasties were very complex with all of that stuff because they imported the prior stuff, which was that punk rock attitude and the sarcasticness of that in there. Again, looking back, I was like, now I see all of the DNA imprints in a lot of the other stuff that I love that came out of those records. And so, yeah, go ahead.
So before we move chapters, we have a question from one of our users that wants to know, who is the new House of Pain?
I don't even know what that means. I see that up at the thing. House of Pain is no longer in my heart. It'll always be. Every St. Patty's Day, I always drop some type of collaboration or some type of product. Product is what I do. Product is what I love to do, and so I always try to keep the vibe alive as far as like remembering the past. But if there's a new House of Pain, good on them, because I think Everlast did a record called Whitey Ford's presents Everlast's House of, I don't know. It was basically a way that he could combine all of his work under one banner and hopefully pitch it to do festivals. Because in my opinion, he doesn't get festivals by himself, but House of Pain books festivals. And if I'm not in there, that ain't House of Pain. So he wanted to figure a way to maybe to get promoters to go, this seems good because we get a little bit of everything. Good luck, hats off. I don't care at this point anymore what anybody does. I realized eventually that I haven't been in the music business for years, so it's a dodgy business to begin with, and I like what I do for a living now. It took me a long time to get here, if that makes sense. So I'm in a place now in my life where I love what I do. I run a small museum, and I do a lot of outreach in a smaller community that appreciates me, and I appreciate it more than it knows. And my life is so good without all of the stuff from the past. So anything that I put out now is really a celebration of that golden era, because I'll always love it. It changed my life.
It brought you to where you are. I mean,
100%.
at the
I
end of the
wouldn't change
day.
any of it. As a recovered alcoholic and drug addict, all of the lowest things, all of that heavy stuff that I was carrying around, all those rocks, when you get sober and you do a 180 and you start to really live a different life, you look in that rock bag and now it's all gold. And it's not gold for me, it's gold for somebody who's coming into sobriety to go, you did this, you did that, you did those things. I didn't think that anybody else suffered and shared those things. Now that I see that there's a commonality, I believe that it maybe could work for me. So everything that all of the bad stuff, it turned out to be currency for other people when I share my experience, strength, and hope with somebody who's in a hopeless state of mind and body, and they understand that I'm talking heart to heart and not head to head. Because if they think to me, they're like, that guy from House of Pain, we used to pay him to drink and punch people. Now he's sober. Maybe there's a chance for me. And when I explain my experience, strength, and hope, they go, okay, I get it. And so, and I don't look back on any of that that way. But the personalities, that's different. You know what I mean? And that changes. I'll always have love for my brothers. I love Everlast and DJ Lethal. Me and Everlast have not only always seen eye to eye, and it's a power struggle. And it's like, it just is one of those things. It's part of being in a band. Somebody takes the lead. I definitely was never looking to lead that band, but I feel that in long term, he was unjust to both of us in the band. By just not thinking about anything but himself. And that's just one guy's opinion. And I'm sure he's got an opinion. And I'm sure I was not the most pleasant guy to be around at certain times in my life and career either. So it is what it is. I look back mostly fondly with all that shit. And again, it got me here. So,
you just described probably a lot of brothers. You got
100%.
relationships.
Some of my favorite bands, like I told you, same struggle. You think the Sex Pistols get along? I mean,
oh yeah, So now listen, you kind of buried the lead there. So to say that you have a little museum. When when John mentioned first that we were going to do this interview, and I was like, I can talk about House of Pain and jump around, but when I started to read what you're doing now, I was like blown away. So. Can you give us the short? So basically,
I will. I'll give you the elevator pitch. So, as a 13-year-old, maybe a 14-year-old, I went to the movies with a friend of mine, and I saw a movie called The Outsiders, a Francis Ford Coppola movie. It launched the Brat Pack. So, Matt Dillon, another New York Irish guy, shout out to him. Patrick Swayze, Tom Cruise, Emilio Estevez, C. Thomas Howell, Ralph Macchio, Diane Lane, and it's basically the story of the haves and the have-nots, and they're greasers and socials, the rich versus the poor. And it's set in 1960s Tulsa, Oklahoma, and it's based on the novel by Essie Hinton, who wrote this novel at 15 and a half, failing English, and got a D plus in creative writing. The novel has never been out of print in 54 years. It sold more on the 50th anniversary than all the years combined, and is required reading for most seventh grade students. It's the librarians and English teachers' book of choice to teach kids the wonders of literature. That being said, I was inspired by the movie. I came here in 2009 after having a 10-year hiatus of being in any band, and I put another band called La Coca Nostra together, and we toured and we played the historic Cain's Ballroom, which the Sex Pistols, it was the second to last venue that they had ever played on their original run. And I fell in love with this small town called Tulsa, Oklahoma. And there was just something about it that felt very familiar with me. And when I realized that it was The Outsiders, I went looking for locations. And eventually that day I found the house. And the house was for sale for $42,000. One, I couldn't believe it was still here on Earth. Two, I couldn't believe it was for sale. And three, I couldn't believe that nobody would buy it for 42 grand. In 2009, 42 grand. I'm like, you couldn't buy anything in Los Angeles with the word real attached to it, much less real estate, for $42,000. But I did not buy it that time. I was definitely intrigued and smitten. But I took a photo, I put it on the internet, and the internet went bonkers. And I realized there was something to this house. So every year I would come back. I started doing urban exploring, where I would take photos of historic places, and I would photo mash them and put them on the internet. So it became a hobby of mine. And within 5 years of going back and forth pondering what to do about this house, I finally was able to reach the owner, make an offer. She accepted the offer. I ended up buying the house for $15,000. It was a complete teardown. I didn't know how I was going to do it or what I was going to do with it. It was not intentionally going to be a museum. I thought that that would be a cool idea. But once I realized how bad the house was, because I bought it sight unseen, I thought, let me bring this to the people and see what they think. So I started a GoFundMe, and I started to get a lot of press, and I started to realize that I wasn't the only one interested in this legacy, and people come out of the woodworks to help me. And I don't know that I would have had that experience in New York or LA. Not to say New York or LA people aren't cool or charitable, but this is a small town, and this legacy is very important to them. The author is still alive and well. She lives here in North Tulsa, South Tulsa, actually. We're here in North Tulsa, and what we were able to do was raise the money little by little to rebuild this house and to turn it into a museum. And I have the largest collection of movie worn pieces, the largest book collection of Essie Hinton's Outsiders. It's been translated into 33 different languages or more. The movie's about to celebrate its 40th anniversary, and it's a masterpiece, and it's a time-honored classic. And with all of the associated actors that came out of that movie, with Coppola's hand in it, with the author Essie Hinton's, and what it means to Tulsa, I built this beautiful little museum with the help of complete strangers, which are Okies, Tulsans, or fans of the movie. I've had help from the author. She's the number one investor in this. Second only to right below that is Jack White, who gave me $30,000 after playing a show at who's another big baseball fan. You need to talk to Jack White. Jack played the Driller Stadium here, which is I think the AA team for the Dodgers, right downtown. And after it, he said, "I'd love to come by and meet you and see the museum." And when he did, he said, "What's holding you up?" I said, "I'm 30 shy of my goal." He says, "I want to give you 30 grand and get you past, get you over the hump." And he didn't waste any time. And I got a check from Jack for 30. About 2 weeks later, Billy Idol pulled into town, who I'm a massive fan and a small friend of. My buddy also plays guitar for him, so they invited me to come to see the show. And my buddy said, "Hey, Billy wants to see you. Go back in his dressing room." I said, "Billy wants to see me?" So I walked back there, and he says, "Hey, man, how's it going? How's the house?" I said, "Huh? Come and get the house? What? What house?" He goes, "The Outsiders house." I said, "Man, you know about I couldn't believe it. Billy Idol knew about the Outsiders house." I said, "You know about the Outside?" He goes, "Yeah, mate." He goes, "I want to give you a little something." I said, "You want to give me something?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm not going to give you what Jack White gave you, but I'm going to give you a little something." And he gave me a check. And I won't tell you how much the check was for, but he gave me a nice little check. And if you're talking about minds exploding, I mean, the 13 and 14-year-old little Danny boy could not imagine in any world that one, Billy Idol would even know my name, much less know what I was working on as an adult, much less give me a check unasked, for So many beautiful things have happened, but the beautiful thing that really has happened is that the people with the least to give have given the most, and what they have given is gift in kind. They've given me their time. They've come in and helped me with the lawn, with the roof, with the chimney, with the flooring, with the whatever I needed. They've come after their daughter's softball practice, or after their son's soccer practice, or after work. At night they'd come and work on it, and that was what means the most to me. Obviously, we needed money to get the job done, but it's people who come and give me their time and the support that I needed, and it changed my life for the better. It was proof and concept, and in a perfect world, this would be the way that all projects went, but this is not how most projects go. And so, my love for Tulsa and the people here is something that I had never experienced before. So I left LA. I come here. I've been here 5 years, and it's only been it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And the hope eventually is to build an S.E. Hinton Museum, because she also wrote Rumblefish, which is also a Francis Ford Coppola movie
I
with Mickey Rourke.
love that movie.
So Rumblefish is another one. That she did Tex, which was precursors. Both of those. There's a Disney movie with Matt Dillon and Emilio, and then there's one called That Was Then, This Is Now. But she's wrote about 8 or 9 novels, and all the people that it touches. So we want to build a museum for a new museum, because the house is small and it's antiquated. I want to build an immersive experience for these young kids to realize that at 15 and a half, somebody did something monumental while failing English and getting a D+ in creative writing. And if she could do it, maybe there's a chance you could do it. And that's really where my heart lies. So I advocate for it full time. This is what I do for a living. And I make my money off the merch, which is just what I did in hip hop. I took all the stuff I learned in hip hop on how to promote and do branding and merchandising, and that's what I do. That's how I get my beak wet, and I love what I do, and I do what I love, and I feel like if I never made a penny at this thing, I'm already overpaid, and that's really what it is. And I make a little bit of change too, so it all worked out.
Danny, I got to tell you, you know how yeah, I know that there's Irish in you. Your elevator pitch lasted longer than the subway ride from Brooklyn to Manhattan, which is
That's
awesome.
what it is.
You
It's a long.
forgot
Hey,
the
I live at the
important.
Mayo. It's 17 floors up, buddy. So I give you what I got to work with. You know what I mean? My
You
elevator goes to
forgot
the
to
top, and
you buried
everybody
the
gets
thing.
off. If you know what I'm saying.
How can readers or watchers of our show here find out more about what you're doing?
It's theoutsidershousemuseum.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and any other, and Instagram. And I will tell you this: I bought the house across the street with the money that we made this summer at the museum. We've turned it into a greaser hideout. So it's an Airbnb directly across the street from the museum, and it's completely wall to wall outsiders memorabilia. And so you get to rent out the house and stay where maybe Johnny Cade would have hung out with his buddies in a 60s way, in an outsider's greaser experience. So, yeah,
So
very happy here.
just one fact that I thought, or maybe hopefully it's a fact. The key in all of this, or one of the keys in all of this, is the librarian Joellen.
Yes, librarian. There was a Miss Masaki, and thank you for bringing her up. We were just able to bring her here after what is it, almost 40 years of her and her students writing letters to Francis Ford Coppola, insisting that he look at this book and perhaps turn it into a movie. She had 100 of her students do so. We were able to bring 4 or 5 of her students from the 80s out to Tulsa, and we brought her here. She got the key to the city. We dedicated a plaque to the Circle Cinema where it was filmed, and to see Thomas Howell and The Outsiders. And we had a wonderful time meeting her. She's an advocate for what we do, and I consider her a long lost friend, even though I've only known her, through the internet, and only got the pleasure and privilege of hanging out with her for a weekend or so. I feel like we could be related, and I cherish my friendship with her, with Susie, with all of the people that I've met throughout this. It's been an incredible thing, and it keeps growing and it keeps going, and this is when rolling a boulder up a hill starts to get a little bit lighter, and you start to feel like you're doing something. You look behind you and you got a whole bunch of people helping you push. That's how I feel. Like the universe kind of just all fell into place, and this thing just kind of worked out the way it was supposed to work out. So,
Well,
yeah.
that's very cool. So I was lucky enough at Foley's to meet a lot of very, very cool people. And George Vesey, very famous writer in New York, he would meet with some people he went to Hofstra with once a month. And so he's there one day and he calls me, he says, Shaun, there's a friend of mine wants to meet you. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be there for lunch. He says, all right. He says, I'm going to get there about 12:30. He says, and he says, FFC's coming in, about 1 o'clock. And I was like,
Nice.
FFC.
Yeah, I know
So
what it is.
lunch starts, everything starts, and the next thing is I look up and here's George, and he says, Shaun, he says, this is FFC wants to meet you, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, he looks very familiar, and I'm like,
Well,
and
that's
I'm
one
like,
on my bucket list too.
holy shit, that's Francis Ford Coppola, and I was like, Francis Ford Coppola wants to meet me. I'm
There you
like the
go.
innocent little Irish guy.
There you
So the
go.
reason why I bring the story up is so we're sitting talking to him, and I was explaining to him how, like I said, my father worked in Touch Shores. So during my father's time there, Mario Puzo spent a lot of time interviewing a lot of people as he was writing The
Godfather.
Godfather.
Of course.
So
That was
Francis
the
Ford
connect.
Coppola, and this is kind of along the same lines as Joe Allen reaching out to him there. So he says, "You want to know?" I said, "Is there anything you can tell us about about what it was like, or what, I mean, obviously it's been life changing." He says, "It nearly never happened." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean it nearly never?" He said, "I read the book." He said, "I hated it." He said, "I didn't like anything." He said, "I couldn't see a movie. I couldn't see anything." He said, "I threw it to one side." He said, he said, "I was struggling." He said, "I was sharing an office slash apartment with a friend of mine in Hollywood." He said, "We were barely breaking even." He said, "I didn't know what I was going to do." He said, "I was at wit's end." He said, and my buddy said, "Read it again. Read it again, and maybe it's something will come to you." So he says, so I read it again. He said, and three-quarters of the way through, light bulbs went
Boom.
off. So I just, me being the nosy guy, said, "If you don't mind me asking," I said, "who is your friend?" He said, "No, you probably never heard of him." I said, "Oh, okay." He said, "George Lucas."
Yeah, of course.
I was like,
They were all film school
so,
buddies.
so
Yeah.
I mean, you have Misaki into the tank, and he
Yeah.
has that. So
And
you so
Coppola and
so
Fred Roos too.
so basically, so what you're doing with the Outsiders, has that led to the? Now, let me get this right. The Delta Bravo Urban Exploration
No,
Team.
the other way around. So when I found the house, I realized I was onto something, and I put a photo on the internet. I also took a photo at Kane's Ballroom where Sid Vicious allegedly punched a hole in the green room before they left after their show here, which was the second to last show. They did this show. Sex Pistols played here, and then they went on to San Francisco, and that's when they broke up on stage. The famous "Do you ever feel you've been cheated?" Blah blah blah. And what I realized was that there was such a reaction of the locations, and that all of a sudden there was a new technology paradigm. So we were like, we had phones now that could access the world's largest library, that could film, that could record, that could broadcast. That maybe I will start to do on this tour bus what had never been done before, which is use it as a time machine and go around looking. So I was sober and highly caffeinated, and I just bought a new camera as well. So I thought, from Tulsa, we're going to go to every place I can go and look for historic stuff. And then I'm going to put this on the internet, the before and the after. So it starts the Delta Bravo Urban Exploration Team, which is still going. And then that started to go so well, I started getting offers from everybody in Hollywood to turn it into a TV show, which never ended up happening. But in doing so, I started going around the U.S. looking for all my favorite movie locations, true crime locations, record cover locations, etc. And it would bring me back and forth to Tulsa for the next 5 years. And I noticed that the Habitat for Humanity was coming through the neighborhood that the Outsiders house was in, tearing out a lot of these houses. And I thought that they might mess up and tear this one out, and it would go unnoticed. And that was the impetus for me to really step up 5 years after finding it and to try to make an offer. And the offer went through, and it changed my life. But yeah, it was so the exploring comes before the actual ownership of the house. But the end product was that I ended up buying the house. So it was brilliant. Yeah,
So we're not going to keep you much longer because in typical Irish fashion, we've gone way over.
that's
So
it.
I did see the recreation of the Harry Houdini picture. Is that you? And
There's a
jumping
whole
off the
bunch of
bridge in
us.
Boston?
There's so much of us out there. That one I don't. That's not me. But we do. If for people listening, what we do is I'll take a historic photo or a screen grab from a movie, and then I'm like, "Where is this?" And then we'll go, whether it's easily Google search, or we have to contact the photographer, or maybe someone who worked on the movie. We'll get the intel, and then we'll go out, and then we'll take a photo of the actual, match it with the photo of the from the past, and then we'll put that together and put it on a Facebook page called the Delta Bravo Urban Exploration Team. And it's a hobby that anybody can do. So we got everybody from famous photographers to cops to military guys to just dudes that are living with their mom in the basement. We don't know, but it's a pop culture guy's uh, uh, like dream come true, because all of the stuff we were raised on as kids, we now know a lot of it was in Hollywood, but there's a lot of stuff that it was, that wasn't in Hollywood, and we go around just documenting all of those stuff.
So
And
my
before I forget, I know we're running out of time, but I do want to, speaking of Irish and baseball, Paul O'Neill, they're retiring his number, and
yes, Paul
maybe,
Paul is, you know what I have to say, Paul is he's a very humble guy, very shy guy. He's actually a member of the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame, who has yet to pick up his plaque because he just doesn't like public places. But delighted for
well,
him.
we'll
And
have to get it to him, because he did me a mitzvah too. Maybe mid-season last year, when the Red Sox Yankees series was going on, they did that. Yes TV does a thing where it's like 3 different questions and they got to guess, and one of them was jump around. So I tweeted out to Jack Curry, and he tweeted into them, and every 3 different times they were talking about House of Pain, Paul buying the CD and listening to it back in his day, and me being a fan of the Yankees. And so for 3 different segments, they had mentioned it, and I got all 3. And it was literally, if I had died that night, I went to heaven happy because of them giving me a shout out, and then just them knowing who House of Pain was, and them knowing I was a diehard Yankees fan. And so my hat's off to him, literally and figuratively, man, and well done, congratulations, and to Jack Curry too, has always been like, we've had
yeah,
a
excellent.
internet relationship, and every time I want to ask a question or get some inside information, he's always good to tell me, what time it is, and so happy for that. And then one more shout out to TJ English. I don't know if you know him. He's the author who wrote The Westies, about the Irish mob at Hell's Kitchen.
Right.
He still spends his time in New York, and I think in New Mexico, but definitely another great one of the early guys that I met who really knew what time it was and put me onto a lot of good shit, good and bad shit as far as it comes to Irish history. And so I can't do this show without properly giving them shouts out. And then yeah.
So my very last question, I promise. So in your search for finding different places, is there one place, is there a holy grail or something that you haven't been able to find that is?
No, it's a great question too. Not that I haven't been. I'll tell you some of the better ones were there's Matt Dillon's first movie was called Over the Edge, and it was filmed in Greeley, Colorado, and it really precurses like the Columbine thing by 30 years. And it's basically a bunch of kids in a new community that was built for like upwardly mobile families, and the kids are worse than like the street kids. And in the end, they lock all the kids in the school. I mean, they lock all the parents at a conference in school and burn the school down. And it sounds terrible, but it's the impetus for Smells Like Teen Spirit video. So Cobain loved the movie so much. It was like a late night classic. The movie was a dud at the theater, but would come on late night TV all the time. So it's called Over the Edge. And I was able to get to the school about a month before they tore it down. And I got through that because I started to realize that a quote in the Breakfast Club from the janitor, who's my friend now, it says, "I am the eyes and the ears of this institution, my friend. I read your letters. I see your lockers. I see your," and I thought, what a better guy to reach out to. So the guy actually turned out to be the lady who had been a janitor at that school for about 30 years. And her and her husband met me and gave me carte blanche to take all the photos I want. I also did that at a school in my neighborhood that I couldn't get access to for years, but they gave me the tour of Van Nuys High School, which was the Fast Times at Ridgemount High School. And I also, the bucket list was for me to go to Munich, Germany, and to go to the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The opening scene, the gate is still there.
Yeah.
It's the power company there in Munich. And to be there, I've been there twice now, is like mind blowing. But there's not I wanted to see the Villa Kula and the Pippi Longstocking TV show, and it's in Sweden. And I've been to Sweden, but it's in a small island, and they've now moved it and made it into like a theme park, and it just lost its luster. But yeah, those kind of things. And one more thing before I forget, I feel terrible if I didn't shout out my man Nako Nolan, who's former NYPD, current LAPD, and he's my right hand. Another Irish guy, Jim McSorley is his real name. But we started the Delta Bravo together, and it was like we were like good cop, bad cop, no pun intended. And we did a lot of the early hits for this thing, and that turned into the Delta Bravo Urban Exploration Team. So without another Irishman on my side, Oh, and I know I'm giving a lot of plugs. I never do this, but I got to do it. Slim Jim from the Stray Cats, Slim Jim Phantom, another Irish baseball loving guy like myself would be another good interview for you, man. And I can't say enough good things about him as well. So.
Well, listen, thank you so much for this. Hopefully
My
maybe
pleasure.
we'll see you on HGTV, seeing as you didn't buy the Brady
Hey,
Bunch first.
listen. You know what's funny that you
Really
say
don't.
that is we got pitched from all the way from the guy to Survivor and Shark Tank, Mark Burnett, and all the way down to Mom and Pop Productions. And at the end of the day, they wanted to change everything about who we were and what we did, and we just didn't feel it was authentic and a waste of our time. So we walked. There was good offers, but we just didn't feel it was going to be something we could pull off. Him being active LAPD and me being like too authentic to change what we did. So it didn't work out. And looking back, it was the best thing because I wouldn't have been doing this if that would have happened probably. So
So one
it all
last
works out
time,
in the end, my friend. Yeah, yeah.
one last time, where can people read more about this stuff and pick up some of the awesome merch?
TheOutsidersHouse.com is all you need to know. Just Google The Outsiders House, Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this is where I be. If you find yourself in Tulsa anytime soon, I'll take you to the Drillers and we'll go watch some watch some double A
I
baseball.
tell you, I've never been to Oklahoma, but maybe me and
You
Foley
have
here will take a road trip. We'll come and
you
see you
not only
guys.
should you come, then I'll take you to Mickey Mantle's spot. There's also I haven't been, but there's a Johnny Bench museum here, a little small one that they made in his hometown, which is like another hour the other way. So I would definitely give you the VIP treatment if you come out here, and you leave the rest to me. Just get
Danny,
yourselves out here.
it's been a pleasure. Congratulations for what you've done, not only with
Thank
your
you,
own life,
man.
but what you've done with other people and how you help people. And you're an inspiration to a lot of people. And I'm glad that we were able to shine a little light on this story. Granted, in crack in the bat terms, we went over, but it's
There you
been
go.
fun.
It's all
Good
good.
luck with it.
My man.
It's a month early. We have an awesome St. Patrick's Day,
You
and we
too.
will definitely stay in touch.
All right, man.
Take
I
care.
appreciate you.
And John has disappeared. I think John may